Hi, Laura. I believe I'm in recovery. Um, so yeah, I'm just gotta get into it. So I grew up in Fraserburgh, Scotland. My family was really abusive. My dad was violent towards my mum. Um, so there was a lot of arguing, and as a child, I remember feeling a lot of fear. I never had a lot of confidence. I always struggled with my confidence, and at the age of 5, me and my brother, well, my mum was meant to be babysitting us, was took away by a stranger and sexually abused. Um, the guy never got caught. The police and that was involved. My mum and dad were still together, still fighting, and they sort of split up. And my mum started drinking a lot. She put us in foster care behind my dad's back. And if you put kids in foster care, you have to fight to get them out. So while I was in there, I was abused physically, verbally, and sexually as well. Finally, I got home after a year at the age of 8, and I told my mum what happened, and she told me that I had to keep it secret because if I told anybody, I would go straight back. So I learned quite young how to push my feelings down and say that I was okay. So then I ended up moving in with my dad. My mum and dad split, and my mum got remarried. And my dad, he's always provided, but he always struggled. We never ever spoke about feelings. We were always just okay, even though deep down, clearly I wasn't okay. I managed to do schoolwork and that. And at the age of 12, my mum was remarried, and I had another little brother. And I started to notice that she'd have black eyes all the time, and she'd be drunk. And I'm from a tiny fishing village, so anything you do, everybody knows. I got picked on because my mum ended up becoming addicted to speed, and she'd be found rolling around the street. And from the age of 14, I used to walk home and I used to think, just as I get to my dad's door, is this got to be the day that my dad's going to tell me that my mum's dead? And then when I was 16, she died in front of me. I was her next of kin. She took a seizure and snapped her windpipe. So I had to sign the papers, and I was just with her on my own. It was a huge thing to be doing at the age of 16. Yeah. So then I went and I buried my mum, and my dad ended up getting with his now wife, and there's been a massive struggle since the time he's been with her. She didn't like me, and she asked my dad to choose me or her. I was 16 and I had a little brother, and I wanted him to have a mum figure, so I chose to move out more because I was scared of what my dad's choice would be. And I got with an older guy that was on heroin. For the first year, I didn't touch it, but I watched him, and I watched the confidence he had on it and the confidence he had without it. And then after a year of watching him and living like an addict, even though I didn't touch it, I got into it, and it was my escape. Within about 3 months, I was injecting, and this relationship was really violent. I was a lot of head games, a lot of bad beatings. But then I would be the one that would be out getting the money and either manipulating my social workers, which I was really blessed to have, if I'm honest, because they knew that I was lying. They just didn't want me committing crime. And then I started selling my body, and I did this in secret, thinking that nobody knew. And like I say, my town is tiny, so people do know. And I remember my relationship was just so toxic. I didn't know what to be in it, but I didn't know what to be without it. And I remember one night lying in my bedroom, I took a load of drugs and I was in agony, and I thought, oh, something not right. I was like, please God, you need to help me. If I'm meant to get out of us, please get me out of us. And there was a solid rock cafe in my town that got started up when I was 16. I used to go in there drunk, and I used to give them a hate to abuse. But when I was desperate, I went in there and I asked for help, and they told me about Teen Challenge. And I went down to Teen Challenge Wales, and it was the first. I went in a couple of times, but in 2007 I went in, and I was determined that I was going to do this program, because every time I went back out, I realised how much I missed what I was having in rehab and the changes that was happening, and the people that I knew from my town and this rehab, I knew their past, and I could see them standing before me, and I knew that if it could happen for them, it could happen for me. And so thankfully they gave me a few chances, and I went back down there. I did a program, I had a lot of good teachings. But the thing is, in that rehab, and I don't want to slag it off because it played a massive part in my life, and that was one of the first places I was shown love. They teach you with discipline. So if you do wrong, you're disciplined. So then my thinking was that if I did wrong, that I was a bad Christian. I wasn't. God didn't love me. Everybody was better than me, because they strive for a height of excellence that isn't achievable. It's not possible to fall short every day. Everybody falls short. But that was my thinking. Completed the program. I became a staff. I graduated. I gave them back 6 months, and then I was offered a job up in Scotland. And truth be told, I only took it so I could get in a relationship that I knew that they wouldn't agree with. Within a year, I ended up relapsing, and I was engaged to be married. My wedding was booked. So the shame of that back in my town, my dad was so proud of me, and then I've relapsed again. So I thought, I don't want him seeing my addiction and him having to hear everything I'm up to. So I moved over to Ireland, and I stayed in that relationship. But I got some work, and I worked in a shop selling legal highs and other stuff. And I ended up getting promoted. I started out part-time, and I ended up becoming a manager, and I thought it was great. I was managing a job, and I was on a script, and I didn't know what to be in this relationship anymore, so I got out of it for good. And then I ended up meeting my partner that I was with for 7 years. And I would say that I had a lot of love in that relationship. And for the first 5 years, it was great. He smoked a lot of the mamba, and we were in and out of addiction, but I had a job paying good money. So I didn't see, in my eyes, I was doing quite well. Clearly I wasn't. I was getting work gouching on the tables. I was a write-off. And then sadly we ended up, company liquidized, and we moved down the country in a hope to get clean. I ended up getting a Christian pharmacist, and that's just doesn't happen. And me and Dean started going over at his house, having Sunday lunch, going to church, going to conferences with him. And Dean decided that he wanted to live his life for God. But sadly, his mental health, he battled really bad. And for the last 2 years, he started slashing himself terrible, in and out with a psychiatrist. But they wouldn't admit him. And we had a big argument, and I was prepared to go back to Scotland. And then the next day, he locked me in the flat, and he went up to the city, and he took his life. And I blamed myself, because that was one of the last things he said to me, would be that it would be my fault. So I carried this guilt. I went back to the UK, and I used, as soon as I got home, I used. And I was in a hotel, and I prayed, and I was like, please God, I was desperate to escape the pain. I didn't know what to be back on drugs, but I didn't know what to feel less pain. And one of my mates that had done treatment, she brought me to her house, and this other mate I did treatment, we now manages another rehab, got me in for 5 months. And then she was starting a Christian supported accommodation place. So I went to move in there, and everything was going well. I was back in church and that. But then she was out drinking, and I started getting out drinking with her. And even though I knew it was wrong, I was still doing it. And then I got with a guy that was in the managers, that he was a manager in the men's centre, and I never knew he was using drugs, and he'd cheat, and he rinsed me for my cash. And I had booked a holiday to Africa to say thanks to us, mate. We went over Africa, and he said to me, if you don't let me come, because we had finished, because I'd found out he was cheating, and he says, if I didn't let him come, it would be my fault if he died. And because I already carried Dean's death, I thought, I ain't carrying another, and I allowed him to come. he was sitting doing a rattle, she was off with a fancy fella, and I went in a taxi, went to the chemist, bought a load of tablets and went off in a taxi scoring crack. I was wasted. The taxi driver ended up sexually assaulting me. And I got in, and then 6 hours later, I found my partner in the bed dead next to me. So obviously my head was in a mess. My mate got my dad to pay an emergency flight, but told me if I went back near the accommodation, and I thought it was because I was a bad person. If I had went back and said, her as a manager and me receiving support, what had actually happened on holiday, she could have lost her job. But I ended up on the streets of Wales, Newport actually. I was set on fire, I was robbed, I landed up in a hospital in a burns unit. I got with this guy and I was warned not to go near him, but I wouldn't listen, and I started smoking crack. Yeah, and then my head would just be gone. I'd be up for days smoking it. I'd be fighting. I'd be so full of fear because everything I'd went through. Sometimes I'd be making up situations that weren't even there, but in my head they were there. So I'd constantly be fighting. He'd be beating me, taking all my money, putting me in cars. Then I went to Birmingham, hoping that he would stop and change, but it just continued. And slept with one of my mates and that, and then rubbed it in my face, playing games in my head, and I ended up getting sectioned, and I got out of that relationship, and I just went straight into another one, like desperate to be loved, and that relationship was even worse than the one I had just left. And thankfully, after 9 months, I got out, and Teen Challenge back in Scotland says that I could go in. I don't really want to talk about it too much, because I feel when the time's right, I will have a voice in it, and it still causes me a lot of pain. I went into Teen Challenge and I used to work here. So I went in and stuff happened that shouldn't have happened, and I had a voice in it, and they wanted me out, but it landed, and the stuff that happened, I ended up getting sectioned again. I was completely broken. I was back home, first time home in ages. I had nobody, sitting on my own. Anybody I got close to let me down. Anybody I trusted. It just, yeah. So one time I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw my mate that I had done Teen Challenge Wales with, and she had light in her eyes, and I messaged her. I was like, how have you managed to get clean? And she was told me about this 12-step program in Walsall, and I didn't have money to pay, but thankfully they let me in, and I found it really hard to open up, to trust, like, because a lot of the rehabs I had done, there had been stuff in them that shouldn't have went on, and I found it really difficult. I was carrying all this trauma and pain and hiding behind all these masks. But it took to the point where I had to be pulled in, and the manager had to sit me down, and it was either buck up or get out, and I chose to buck up. Then thankfully, a place in Western came up as I was ready to move on, a girl's house, and I never heard of Believers in Recovery ever, and I always struggled because I always thought I had to be as perfect Christian, and that I'd be judged, and that if I did something wrong, I had to stay out of church, and that isn't the case. And then it turned out that my house manager runs Believers back in Weston, and then I started going there, and I never ever felt judged. I feel accepted there, and it doesn't matter. Like I have struggled, I've made mistakes, but I've just been loved through them. Never told, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You should, like, yeah. And I'm still learning. I'm still healing. I've got a lot to do, but I'm really excited. I've started volunteering with criminal justice, so God's definitely got a sense of humour, because I'm now working with people in courts, and they'll be mouthy, aggressive. That used to be me, and now I'm sitting working with them. But yeah, I've started college, learning to be an accountant, and yeah, I never ever thought this would be possible. I thought I was destined to die. It was just a matter of when I'd be found. but God had bigger plans, and he definitely had his hand on my dance with the devil, and I walked away from him so many times. But his ways are better than mine, and I'll leave it at.
Beautiful. Thank you, Laura.
Is that any more?